Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a super fascinating study out of New Mexico that looks at the very roots of career inspiration. Like, how exactly does a tiny spark of interest turn into a lifelong vocation? Now, we're looking specifically at school-based agricultural educators, but honestly, the psychology and the pathways we're going to uncover here, they apply to pretty much any professional journey. We're going to explore exactly how mentors and student organizations shape our career paths, transforming that early curiosity into a massive, lasting impact.
Okay, let's dive right into this with a really simple question. Who inspired you to choose your career? Think about it for a second. Was it a family member, maybe a famous industry leader, or perhaps was it a teacher who saw something in you way before you even saw it in yourself? Keep that person in your mind as we go, because we're going to scientifically break down exactly how that inspiration works.
To do this, we're going to follow a really clear roadmap. We'll start with 1, the teacher shortage crisis, then 2, the student organization spark, 3, the power of mentorship, and finally 4, the cycle continues.
All right, jumping right into Section 1, the teacher shortage crisis.
So the shortage of agricultural educators really isn't a new phenomenon. Just look at this timeline. We've actually seen a documented deficit every single year since 1965. Fast forward to the mid-2000s, and the data showed that only 53% of newly certified ag ed grads were actually entering the teaching profession. Barely half. And looking at where we are right now in the present day, an alarming 45 states are reporting severe shortages. I mean, we're talking about schools being forced to just completely close their agricultural programs. This is a massive systemic issue, and it absolutely demands proactive recruitment and retention solutions. We can't just cross our fingers and hope people decide to become teachers. We've got to figure out how to purposefully inspire them.
Which brings us to Section 2, the student organization spark.
To figure out what actually ignites this interest, researchers surveyed 82 agricultural educators across New Mexico. And you know what's incredibly valuable about this sample size? It's the rich diversity of experience it represents. If we break it down, roughly a third have been teaching for 1 to 5 years, another quarter for 6 to 15 years, and almost a third have been in the trenches for over 16 years. This diverse pool proves that the foundational spark of inspiration we're talking about isn't just some passing fad, it's a totally universal experience that transcends generations of educators.
But hold on, what exactly is a spark? Let's ground this in some actual psychology for a second. According to Thrash and Elliott's psychological framework, true inspiration consists of 3 absolutely crucial elements. First up is transcendence. That's the passion, right? The ability to look past the everyday grind and see a higher purpose. Second is evocation. This basically means you don't necessarily plan to be inspired, it just kind of happens to you, usually triggered by something external. And finally, motivation. That's the energy that actually compels you to take action on those ideas. So when we talk about recruiting professionals, we are literally talking about engineering this exact 3-part psychological state. So what actually triggers that unwilled spark, that evocation for young agricultural students? Well, the study found that early involvement in structured student organizations, specifically programs like the FFA and supervised agricultural experiences, you know, those hands-on real-world farming projects, they provide the absolute fundamental building blocks. These programs do some serious heavy lifting. They increase a student's self-efficacy, which is just a fancy way of saying their belief that they can actually do the job. They build tangible, necessary skill sets, and perhaps most importantly, they foster a highly positive view of the profession, acting as a major, formalized entry pathway into the whole field.
And you can see the overwhelming agreement on this survey metric right here. When participants were asked how strongly their FFA membership influenced them to become a teacher, the vast majority agreed or strongly agreed. The data is crystal clear. Structured, hands-on student organizations are not just fun extracurricular clubs, they are literally active incubators for the next generation of professionals.
Moving on to Section 3, the power of mentorship. So the really crucial point here is how this organizational spark is fanned into a full-blown flame. And that is best explained by something called social learning theory. This is basically the concept that individuals don't just learn in a vacuum, right? We learn and make massive life choices like our career paths through observing inspirational role models and engaging in active mentorship. Early exposure to teaching role models draws students into the profession because they get to see the job modeled successfully right in front of them. It makes it real.
But honestly, it goes way beyond just passively watching a good teacher at the front of the room. The research highlights an incredibly powerful active intervention. Just think about the difference between passive classroom learning and having a mentor look you dead in the eye and say, hey, you would be a really good teacher.
The study points to previous research demonstrating that this simple, deliberate gesture of a teacher actively telling a student they have what it takes heavily influences their eventual career path. It takes inspiration from this abstract idea and makes it deeply personal. Now, what's really interesting here is how this theory is confirmed in the raw survey metrics. On one side, we see strong agreement from participants who stated, "I was encouraged by a teacher to become a teacher." And on the other, super high agreement that their decision was impacted by their cooperating teacher during their own training. These aren't just warm and fuzzy feelings, guys. These are the exact, measurable metrics proving that dedicated mentors are the active drivers of professional recruitment.
To really synthesize all of this, the study cites this powerful finding. Agricultural educators who actively encourage their students and involve them in organizations like FFA play a pivotal role in motivating these students to consider careers in this field. It is the powerful, intentional combination of structured student organizations and dedicated mentorship that successfully recruits new talent. It's the ultimate 1-2 punch.
Let's move to section 4 and see how this builds. The cycle continues. So, what actually happens when these inspired, mentored students finally become teachers themselves? Well, the results are incredibly promising. A massive 77% of the agricultural educators currently in the field now actively encourage their own students to consider agricultural teaching careers. Because they were mentored, they instinctively know they've got to pass that mentorship on. Furthermore, an overwhelming 84% of these educators believe that agricultural teachers play a vital role in shaping our nation's future. This really highlights the deep social utility value of the profession. They don't just see this as a clock-in, clock-out job. They see it as a true vocation with a profound societal impact. And that's a belief system that was instilled in them by their own mentors years and years prior.
And this brilliantly illustrates the long-term impact of those early sparks we discussed. The researchers found a statistically significant positive correlation, a 0.26 correlation value, if we want to get exact, between a teacher's early participation in FFA as a student and their adult belief that teachers play a vital role in shaping the nation's future. Basically, this empirical data point proves that early involvement in student organizations doesn't just teach you farming skills, it directly correlates with a lifelong, deeply ingrained respect for the teaching profession itself.
When you step back and look at all of this data together, a really clear narrative emerges. The ultimate solution to systemic issues like the teacher shortage isn't just throwing funding at it or changing policies, though don't get me wrong, those are definitely important. But the true, sustainable solution is the creation of a new mentor. When you successfully recruit a teacher, you aren't just filling a single vacancy for 1 year, you're creating a catalyst. You are naturally setting off an ongoing chain reaction of inspiration that is going to impact dozens, if not hundreds, of future generations. But honestly, perhaps the most astonishing statistic in this entire study is this: 99% of respondents view themselves as role models to their students. Almost every single one. They recognize the weight and the privilege of their position. They completely understand that the cycle of inspiration that brought them into the classroom is now resting entirely in their hands. The true beauty of this New Mexico study is that its lessons extend way, way beyond agriculture and honestly, far beyond the classroom too. The combination of structured organizational experience and active personal mentorship, that's a universal formula for career longevity and fulfillment. So think back to that person who inspired you at the very start of our time together. Now ask yourself, how can you act as a mentor in your own field to fulfill the cycle of inspiration for someone else? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some ideas for how you can guide the next generation in your own community.